A good way of working with Vectorworks in Teams is the use of referenced files. So here I want to quickly show how to set up your show and how to synchronize your files, so to make for an easy workflow. I created a sample show with your normal kind of file structure. You've got design, lighting, meeting minutes, production management, and so on. I've put in a folder for venue plan. The idea is that you put a clean venue plan into this folder, and then various departments that want to access this folder this Vectorworks plan can then reference the layers from that file into their own drawing, so that everybody works in their own drawing and there is a central reference file. But also different departments can reference each other, so I can, for example, in my lighting file, reference the TSD layers and so on. But the best way to do that is to create a locally synchronized file structure so that you can work with those files locally on your computer. Because being referenced, it means that the file needs to see the other files locally, otherwise it will break the reference. So if you were to just download files from Teams onto any old machine, you would break that reference, and therefore the whole system doesn't really work. Even though you could still work within your own files and layers, you would not see the other referenced layers. So when you've got a show set up in Teams, this is the Teams app on a Mac, you can see a sync button up here. If I press this, having previously downloaded the OneDrive app onto my computer, because I've been synchronizing other files before, it will create a local version of this file structure. So I'm just going to press sync. It comes up with this. You can see that it very briefly popped up with the Microsoft OneDrive window, and now it's saying that it's synchronizing. If I now go into my Finder, I can see that I have a folder called Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and that has previously synchronized channels from a different project, and Christoph's sample show, which is Christoph's Experiments sample show. So the team is called Christoph's Experiments, and sample show is the channel. So if you were to do this with a show in the production unit hub, you would get a folder here that says production unit hub stroke and then your show channel, and within it you can see you now have access to all of the folders that are also in here. They've got a little cloud symbol. That means they're not actually physically on this machine. They would have to be downloaded. So right now I've put a few subfolders in there. There's nothing in there at the moment. So this is how I now synchronize to my local machine. So that means I can now, if I want to go to my desktop, I have the Chandler. So I'm just going to grab this and actually I'm just going to make a copy of it, and then I'm going to back into my Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, Christoph Sample Show venue plan, and I'm going to plonk this copy in here. This is now my Chandler plan in the venue plan folder. I'm going to rename this one and call it Sample Show 2020, because that's the date. Not to be confused with version 2020, I'm in Vectorworks 2019. So this file, you can see, it's now got the synchronization symbol here, so that's currently uploading to Teams. That means it will be available. You can now get a tick. So if it has a tick, it means it is stored locally on my computer, but it's also synchronized with Teams. So if I go back in here and I have a look in my venue plan folder, I can see the sample show is now here. So far so good. Now this sample show at the moment contains nothing. It's just the empty Chandler. So I now go into Vectorworks and I have an untitled empty file here. I'm just going to go into my layers and I'm going to make I have a design layer. I'm going to make a new layer and call it LX overhead, because I'll probably have one later for sides and booms and whatever. So you can see now I have two layers here, design layer and LX overhead. I now go into, now first I'm going to save it just to avoid confusion. I'm going to go into my file menu and save this one. And I'm going to save it locally in Royal Conservatoire Scotland, sample show, lighting, LX design, and call it sample show LX. So that's going to be the name of my lighting design file that I will be working with. I now can reference the venue into this file. So to do that, I suspect I should probably make sure I'm in the same layer scale. I'm just going to set this to 1:1, see what happens. So I can either use this navigation window here to go to my referenced files, right-click that and add a new one. I can get the same if I go to the main layer window. I'm going to use that because it's a bit bigger, so for this screencast it might be a little easier to see. So you've got your classes in your design layers and your sheet layers. You're very familiar with using these, no doubt. And there's a references tab here, and I can create a new reference. This is where I need to find my file, Royal Conservatoire Scotland, Christoph sample show. Now I want to reference the venue plan. This is going to be the source of my references. And I press open. Thank you very much. Now it's important here in this dialog that where it's looking for my source file, I save the reference location as a path relative to current document. If I make this the absolute path, it will still find it, but as you can see here, it has my local file structure. So it has my user folder, Christoph, Royal Conservatoire Scotland, and so on. If I make this relative, it will basically just go down 2 levels and then look in folder venue plan, sample show, and so on. This means that if I later on move the whole channel as a whole folder into an archive or into a hard drive where you keep backups or wherever you want to keep stuff, these references will still work because it's relative. As long as the relationship between the two files doesn't change, it will always find the other one. So it's really important not to use the absolute path, because when you're synchronizing, mine is obviously in Christoph. If someone else, say Steve, has his local file synchronized, then his path will have the word Steve in it and they won't find each other. So I'm pressing OK for that. So now I have the sample show in here, but I still don't have any layers in my design layers. So while I have this selected, one thing I want to do is press Settings, and I want to use the method for layer import. I want to basically make sure that it is layers that are imported. And I select this again and then press Edit. And here I can now see the layers available. So I can choose what I want to reference. So I want to reference everything for now. I can always turn things off later. These settings I can change later as well. I can turn off the references, or I can turn the visibility later on. I'm going to leave everything else as it is and press OK. So it's going to think about this for a while now. And when it has done so, it now says status up to date. That means it has imported everything from that file, and it also knows that since the last time it has imported these referenced layers into this, nothing has been edited in this file. So if I go to my design layers, you can now see I still have my LX overhead, I have my design layer, but I also have these layers in italics, which means when I go to my drawing now, I should see them. Let's make this one live. I suspect this is something to do with the speed of my computer that I can't see them. I'm just going to make this a bit bigger. see if I change the layer scale, if things start appearing. There it is. Okay. I now have the chandler. You can see what have I got? I've got a gray snap others, which is why it's great. So I can make it show snap others. So I can now work within this. I have my LX overhead selected. I can start putting things in. Let's see what I've got from my library of tools. I'm going to bring in, let's bring in a source 4. Shall we have a junior? Since we have juniors in the chandler, here we go. I right click it, import. I'm going to create a new folder in my sample show file. It's good, and call it LX fixtures, keeping things neat and tidy. Okay, so now I have this in here. Double click it to activate the instrument insertion tool, and you can see it's now snapping to these hanging positions as if they were in this drawing. So there's not a visible difference in working in this drawing to working with the drawing where the layer is actually present. So I'll hang this lantern here, and you can see it has actually automatically seen this lighting position, attached itself to LX6, even though this position is not in this drawing. So it does work exactly in the way you would expect it to behave if you were working in the same drawing, but actually in this drawing that I'm looking at, the only thing in this drawing is 2 fairly empty layers with 1 lantern in it. So if I now wanted to make sure that my master drawing has the lighting in it, I could go back into that drawing and then reference this layer into that drawing so that the 2 drawings reference each other and both drawings then look complete. It's really up to the team working together to discuss how they want to use this, whether there is a master drawing that has everything referenced into it, or each individual drawing references everyone else's drawing, so each drawing can act as a master. But what this means is I can locally set up sheet layers. I can locally set up my XML file to talk to LightWrite without interfering with anything that TSD, sound, or designers or anyone else is doing with the drawing. So maybe I'll just show you. So if I just save this, and I'm going to close it just to avoid anything getting confused. If I go into my file structure in lighting, LX design, now have my sample show LX. So now what I'm going to do is go to venue plan and open my master plan, which, as you can see, just opens in whatever the default for that is. I'm just going to go somewhere in the design layers. Have a look at it. You can see it's the normal layer structure that you're used to from the chandler, but in here I'm now going to add a reference. New reference. I'm going to add from my sample show lighting folder, LX design, sample show LX. I want to create a reference to my lighting design again. I'm making sure it's relative, so it stays the same. Go into settings, make sure layer import is ticked, and I select it, edit, and I can see I'm not interested in the design layer because at the moment that's empty anyway, but also I probably won't want that. I want the ones that is marked LX overhead, and press OK. So now I'm going to think about this for a minute. And hopefully in my design layers I now have here in italics the LX overhead layer. So press OK. I can see now I've got my catwalks turned off. Maybe I'll just turn catwalks on and LX positions. There it is, my lantern. It's great because it is in a referenced drawing. But I can see the complete design in here without actually putting any of these things in here, and if I want to, obviously I can turn these layers off just as you're used to. meaning that I have now two instances where I can look at the complete project, but each one only contains some of the information in the drawing that I'm looking at and references the other pieces of information in.